Good evening and welcome to this Wednesday night book study. As we've mentioned in the past, it is part of our rule of life. It is part of our structure here at New Covenant House, in addition to the Tuesday night community development gatherings that we have that is open to anybody who is interested in intentional communities and monasticies. It's important to have some sort of structure in your life, some sort of rule, like Saint Benedict wrote in the, I believe, 5th or 6th century or something like that. And so that's why we're doing it, and because it feels comfortable to have a rule like that. I also personally have other rules. I get up at the same time every day. I go to bed at the same time every day. And my routine daily is pretty much the same every day. And that gives me a great peace to do that. But Wednesday night, it's book study time. And we are studying Christian and Anarchism by Alexander Christianopoulos. And we are in the first chapter in the book, which you can, by the way, download from the event page, from the event notification page that I created every week. And I encourage you to do that because we have the text today is the third point in the nonviolence section, and the story tonight is a page and a half or so, but it's so packed with information that we just can't go over all of it here. I encourage you to read it yourself because it really gives you a good idea, a really excellent idea of what he's talking about here. So this idea of lex talionis, I've studied a little bit, and it turns out that it was codified in Roman law in around year 500 to 600, something like that. But we all know that it existed long before then in ancient Israel time, because it's mentioned in Exodus 21, and according to the tradition, Moses wrote Exodus. Scholars now beginning to realize that it may not have been Moses, but maybe a collection of other writers. But anyway, it was mentioned in Exodus 21, and the Jews have been following that ever since. Now, the famous quote that we recently obviously hear about this is when Jesus says, ye have heard that it hath been said, but I say unto you. For some people that means that he is rejecting the old law. It does imply a disapproval of it, but I think what he's disapproving of is really the interpretation of that law. Because later on in the text here today it says that the intention of what he says and what the ancient text says is the same. And the objective is the same, to have justice between feuding parties. What Jesus is adding to it is that instead of walking away as still enemies, they should be able to walk away as friends. And that's what he means by turning the other cheek. A totally surprising reaction to an attack. So now, apparently lex talionis came around because before that conflict would escalate really quickly. And if you had, like it says, if you have somebody knock out one of your teeth or an eye, you would be lucky not to be killed or lynched. The word is lynched here, but it's the same thing. So that is why lex talionis came about. God said, this is too much. You have to restrain yourselves and knock out only one eye if you lose an eye to somebody. You can't make it two or even kill the person. So that's what that is. But the Jews, and some people have interpreted that as say, if you knock out an eye, you can't compensate with something else to make the offended, the victim whole. It has to be an eye. So it has to be one eye for one eye, and it can't be an eye for a foot or something like that. And that is obviously not what God intended. He intended justice, and that can be traded so that whatever is fair to the parties is a good solution. So lex talionis therefore provides the basis for either retributive, which means punishment of the offender, or restorative, which means compensation by the offender, kind of justice. These principles, Pinner, who's the writer about this, Pinner remarks, were not used only in the times of Jesus, but are also basis in the civil and criminal law today. I think I would going to dispute that, because today's justice system is in many ways still based on revenge, or at least retaliation, or and it even goes back as far as the pre-Exodus times, where they had this tendency to overreact. You can just look at all the people who have been jailed for minor drug offenses. That is completely an overreaction for a minor offense. So, yeah, I think it's at least I think that it's not correct that we have that today. We have something even further back. So, in other words, the intention of lex talionis is justice, and there's no dispute between the Jews and Jesus about that. The overarching goal is justice, but they come to it from different sides. So some other writers, Pinner is one of these writers that we are talking about. So Christianopoulos is trying to consolidate all these writers into one place, and so here is another fellow called, his name is Bartley. He writes, Jesus made it clear that lex talionis was not enough, and instead urged forgiveness and what many would see as the creation of an upward spiral of peace. So I think that was what I was mentioning before, that the goal is for the disputants not to walk away as enemies, but to walk away as friends. And another fellow here, Yoder, says, what in the Old Covenant was a limit on vengeance has now become a special measure of love demanded by concern for the redemption of the offender. So, and we have some fresh examples of that. And there have been like at least half a dozen executions scheduled around the country lately, and at least one of them, the family, members of the family of the victim have been campaigning for having the sentence, the death sentence of the offender commuted. So, but it looks like this state is going to go ahead and with the execution anyway. And that is completely outside of what Jesus is talking about here, in my opinion. So, in other words, what it says here is, but both commands are informed by the same intention, but non-resistance to evil goes further, that the more rigid law of reciprocity, that is the eye for an eye law, so he goes further. Indeed, this is one of the senses in which Jesus fulfills rather than destroys the law. So in other words, Jesus goes further and he fulfills what it was the original intention of the law, namely justice. And justice doesn't necessarily have to be what you think it is. If you're a third party, and justice in the eyes of the law here in our government is always some artificial justice, and the victim and the offender have very little influence on how punishment is meted out, if at all. Except lately it has been possible for victims to make a statement at sentencing time. I don't know if that's going to make any difference at all. But Jesus wants reconciliation. That's what he's up to. So that was a little bit about Lex Talionis. I encourage you to read the chapter yourself. It's chapter 113 on page 35 in the book. I don't know what page it is on in the PDF file that you can download. It may be slightly different. And next week we're going to go into the fourth point in this violence section of the Sermon on the Mount. It's called the cycle of violence. We have several times mentioned that violence has a tendency to escalate, and that's probably what we're going to be hearing about. It's about 3 pages long, so again, next week I'm going to have to summarize quite a bit, 3 or 4 pages actually. So thank you for coming, and I look forward to next week. Hopefully we can have a discussion, but if you are not comfortable participating in the live events, then I encourage you to go into the group and type in your comments once I have uploaded the video, which we are recording right now. So thank you for coming, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.